Let's do this. The Cult of Hockey podcast by the faithful and for the faithful. I'm David Staples of the Edmonton Journal, and I'm here today with Bruce McCurdy. Hey, Bruce.
Hey, David. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. How are you doing?
Every day I wake up and we haven't played the Leafs the night before is a better day.
I've been processing that, Bruce, and we're going to end. I'm going to ask you a surprise question on lessons learned at the end of
Okay.
this podcast. That's the last thing
Okay,
we'll
I'll
do.
act
Lessons learned,
surprised.
because I've been thinking about that. I'm going to write a post on it. But today we're going to be talking about, well, something related to that. What do the Oilers need to do at this trade deadline and essentially heading into expansion? And it's a very complicated question. They've got a surplus of talent both on the roster and in the pipeline on defense. They're shaky both at the NHL level and in the pipeline in net, and forwards kind of in between that. They're kind of in the middle in terms of where they are with their forward ranks, I would suggest. So we'll talk about, Bruce, what are the Oilers' needs, um, what price that might cost for the Oilers, and what they might give up. And I'll just start it off with a poll that I did earlier this week, Bruce. And I asked fans, and since most of my readers on Twitter are Oiler fans, it was mostly Oiler fans answering. We had 1,800 people get back to us. What is the
Wow.
Oilers' top priority at the coming trade deadline, which is April 12th? Is that correct?
Yes, Yuri's Day.
What day?
Yuri's Day. It's named for Yuri Gagarin. And in fact, this year will be the 60th anniversary of Yuri Gagarin's first uh, trip of any human into space. He did one orbit around the Earth on April 12th, 1961.
And to bring that back to hockey, I believe that the KHL's championship trophy is known as the Gagarin Cup, if I'm
It
not
is indeed.
mistaken.
Yeah, he's a very famous dude. And what a heroic feat for all of those early cosmonauts and astronauts to get on top of one of those rockets. Still,
Yeah.
still takes tremendous courage to do it, as far as I'm concerned. But imagine with the burgeoning technology, light that candle. That's what Alan Shepard said when they were having delays during his first. He was the first American to go up. Just light that candle.
It's a different breed. What is the Oilers' top priority at the coming trade deadline? Okay, so the picks were a top goalie, a top attacking winger, a third line center, or no major trade needed. Okay, a top goalie was the first pick.
Oh,
48.5%
oh.
said that was the top priority. A top attacking winger, 19.8%, so 20%. Um, a third line center, 15.5%, and no major trade needed was 16.2%. And I actually might be in that final camp, um,
So
mainly
half
because
half goalie and the other half split almost equally among the three choices.
that's right. So where are you, Bruce? What would you say is the top need if they're going to make, or what would you, I don't know if you took the poll, but what would you have voted?
I was midway between a top attacking winger and no trade needed. And I think I chose a top attacking winger, depending on how top was top and what the price tag was.
Top six.
Yeah. I mean, ideally, sure, but it has to be the right guy and it has to be the right price. So I always have my caveats. But in that perfect world, yeah, great. Grab a top six winger and fill out that top six.
Yeah, I voted. I can't even remember how I voted now. I probably said so because I'm kind of heavily leading in the no major trade needed category, but I can see both. I don't think they need a third line center. I know that the face-off issue on the PK is indeed an issue, a real issue. But Kara and Gaetan Haas have been playing so well, and Devon Shore can fill in a pinch. So I'm not seeing that as a major need on the team. And the whole thing about we were talking about getting Sutter from Vancouver. Like, I mean, is he
Yeah.
better than Kyle Turris? Are they sure he's better than Kyle Turris? I'm not sure. I've never seen him stand out in a game in any significant way. So I don't
Well,
like
not
that
at that
rumor.
price tag. I mean, I think he's 4.4 or something like that, or 4.3, and he's got, and it's expiring, and you might be able to get them to retain depending on what their exact circumstance is. But I'm not. I mean, it depends a lot on where Vancouver is in a month. I mean, after all, last night they defeated the unbeatable Toronto Maple Leafs 3-1. Maybe they're going to make some noise now that they finally got a couple of days off. But anyway, he might be certainly is a candidate for on the market, but I'm not sure he's an upgrade, and I'm not sure how he make him fit under the salary cap, and I'm not sure I want to give up a whole lot for him. So to me, that's a non-starter. I'd rather stick with Kara and Haas to tell you the truth, and Kyle Turris. I mean, don't forget, I was going to remind you until you mentioned him, but he's already moved himself out of the discussion almost for 3C with his horrible start.
Oh, I think he has, Bruce. I have not seen anything from the player in any game yet that makes me think he's going to make a contribution. Um, I would have said the same thing, probably, maybe a little less definitively about Kara a month ago. So
Mm.
could be wrong.
I
But
saw Turris
Kara's a
actually
lot
half.
younger, right? And
Yes, I saw Turris half decent in the last game against Toronto when he finally got put it back in the lineup. But I think it was more a matter of he would look closer to the rest of the Oilers because the rest of the Oilers were having a bad game than anything he was doing to stand out. But
yeah,
but
I just haven't
I'm not
seen it.
holding my breath.
Neither am I. So anyway, so we both agree third line center is kind of the least of the priorities. The no major trade needed thing, Bruce, is contingent for me. You'll know more in a few weeks, 2 or 3 weeks, closer to trade deadline, on Mike Smith's play. If he can continue to play strong hockey, and we know Koskinen's had good runs, um, then you might not need a goalie. I think goalie is where I think they probably have the biggest real need. Um, it would be like Vegas last year, where you wouldn't have thought they had a need with Marc-Andre Fleury, although Fleury wasn't playing that well last year. I think he had a 907 save percentage on the year, if I'm not mistaken. And they brought in Robin Lehner, and they,
Right.
they they paid the price of a second round draft pick and Malcolm Subban, and Toronto was worked into the deal to eat some of Lehner's salary. So Edmonton would have to do something different probably if they were to bring in a top goalie. And there's a couple names that have been floating out there. There's, I think, I think his name is Chris Dreger,
Yeah.
uh, kind of a veteran, unsung goalie
Yeah.
who's having quite a year in Florida. I don't know why they trade him. They're in first place. Like, are they?
Yeah, I don't think they'll trade him at the deadline, and he's a as I understand it, a UFA at the end of the season. And of course, they've made their bed with goalie Bob Sergei Bobrovsky, who they gave a 7-year, $70 million contract. My best Danny DeVito imitation from Twins. $70 million contract for Sergei Bobrovsky. And I mean, that's just a boat anchor that they can't possibly get out from under. And Dreger looks to me like he could be a number one goalie in the NHL, but I think he'll go on the market and he'll be a hot commodity this summer. And frankly, that's when I think the Oilers should be dealing with the goalie situation. In season is a really brutal time to be trying to find a netminder, especially with a 2-week quarantine.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the athletics list for goalies. Kemper, they're saying Kemper might be traded.
Mm-hmm.
Um, what else do we got here? What do you think about trading for a goalie, Bruce? Is that on your list even? Because I
During the
think it is
year,
definitely on my list. Yeah.
yeah, no, I hear you. During the year, I just don't think it's feasible. Um, I mean, maybe more feasible now than it was. Like in one sense, you could say, well, the Oilers just brought in another NHL goalie and Alex Stalock. Now they have three. But in fact, Stalock might facilitate the Oilers being able to make a move. If they trade a goalie for a goalie, it's not a matter of, oh, now we've only got one goalie for 2 weeks while the new guy clears quarantine. They could have um, they could have still two NHL goalies on staff while they waited for the incomer to clear quarantine. But I don't see it as a 1980 situation where they need to do something, anything to bring in Ron Lowe to solve their problems. Uh, I just think they've made their bed and they're just going to have to live with it, and next summer make it a priority again. Hopefully, actually get something done.
Yeah, I think the chances are that we're going to see Smith continue to play well, and like he can always get injured and not suddenly play well again. But he's been playing well, generally speaking. He looks really super sharp, and the we were talking last time about I think how um, where it is that he's remade his game. Like
Yeah,
he's built his game
astonishing.
from the body, from the ground up, from the core up, from the core of his body up, and so yeah, I'm not sold that that's going to be the move they'll make. It looks like I'm thinking forward, Bruce,
Hmm.
and I think the Oilers have an. I don't think they can give up any draft picks this year. They're missing what their second, their third, and their fifth from Ennis, Athanasiou, and Lucic trades.
Needle, yeah,
Neil.
yeah.
So giving up a draft pick doesn't seem to be in the cards, but they've got a glut of good defensemen, both on the team and in the system. And um, if I was, if I had to make a trade right now, I think the Oilers it would have to be a pretty bold trade because you're going to trade a good player for another good player would be
Hmm.
how it would work if you're going to go down that road. Let's say you're going to try to get Ricard Raquel or Philip Forsberg or Taylor Hall or a player like that.
Hmm.
Um, you're going to have to give up a good player. And would the player I would move would be Tyson Barrie, if I'm completely honest.
Hmm.
Um, I don't think on the power play you'll lose much if you just slot Evan Bouchard in there right now for Tyson Barrie on the power play. And at even strength, Tyson Barrie is a decent player, but he's not a great player. He's not even a good player. He's a decent player. And Ethan Bear, I think, who has been struggling a lot this year, immensely actually, I think can be as good as Tyson Barrie at even strength. So he's the one. He's on an expiring contract. I don't think the Oilers can afford everybody going forward. And that would be the move that I would make would be if I was to target a goalie or a forward, it would be to trade Tyson Barrie for that player. So you're going to have to look for a team that uh, needs someone like that, needs a defenseman, probably a playoff. It could even be a playoff team, right? That would be looking for a defenseman because it's not going to be a team that's out of the playoffs that's going to want Tyson Barrie. What good is he to
Yeah,
them?
it's an expire. He's a rental at this point. I mean, he's a to
Yeah,
me to me he's a 1 year rental by the Oilers, and I expect them just to keep him for the 1 year. And what they do this summer, whether they get tempted to re-sign the guy for term and big raise based on at least how he started for his points, which are a big determinant of how big the contract is. To me, there's the two things I like most about the Tyson Barrie contract are term and cap hit, and especially term, 1 year term. I thought that was perfect. Uh, Anything more than that, he would have been a major roadblock to Evan Bouchard. At this point, he's a roadblock to Evan Bouchard, but one with a finish line in sight. And Bouchard's get sort of given a little bit more luxury of time to develop in the third pairing part of the team. He may well be learning things directly from Tyson Barrie, given they have things in common. But basically, they're both competing for the same position, which is kind of third pairing right defenseman, a little bit sheltered, and first power play. And right now, Barry's got the inside track on those things, and I'd like to think at the end of the year they walk away from Tyson Barrie and they say, Evan, you're ready now. You take the job, and you've got an entry level contract, and we're going to save about $3 million, or I guess 2 million after bonuses potentially. But that's an area where sort of natural progression to me is let Barry go to the market and let Bouchard get promoted. but in
See,
the summer.
when they signed Barry, they didn't know necessarily that Evan Bouchard would be ready this year.
Mm-hmm.
But since they've signed Tyson Barrie, they have more information. They,
Yeah.
they have Evan Bouchard's outstanding play in Sweden in the second division, granted, but played very well. He came to camp in the best ever shape that they've ever seen him, showing kind of a seriousness in the player that they hadn't maybe seen before in terms of conditioning. They've seen him now in NHL games where he's held his own at the very least and has generally looked. I mean, he hasn't played as tough minutes as Tyson Barrie, but I think his level of performance has been at even strength better than Tyson Barrie's overall. Granted, facing tough competition is a major equalizer
Yeah.
that, that you have to take into consideration. But I don't think Evan Bouchard is a weaker even strength player right now than Tyson Barrie, or is going to be a weaker power player. And so the problem with my Tyson Barrie trade suggestion, obviously, is that he only makes sense as a rental to a good team. So the Oilers probably aren't going to be moving him out for that reason. Why would you move out a veteran who can help you win in the playoffs this year? That's the goal for the Oilers this year. It should be the goal. They have a chance to win the Stanley Cup this year. Not a great chance, but they have a chance, and I think they should go for it. So to get the forward, Bruce, to get that forward, let's say that they want, or the goalie, they're going to have to give up a young defenseman. Because it's going to be a team that's going to want someone who's going to be around for the next couple of years and can help them win next year or the year after that or the year after that, not Tyson Barrie. So the guy I would trade isn't that enticing to most teams. So that leaves you with, I think, trading one of the top prospect defensemen, like Dmitry Samorukov comes to mind. He's injured right now. But that would be okay for a team looking to improve into the future. Or Ethan Bear, Caleb Jones, or William Lagesson are the next most likely assets, because those are guys, unlike Adam Larson, say, or Tyson Barrie, and I think the Oilers should re-sign Adam Larson. But Bear, Jones, or Lagesson, I think, or say Samorukov, because I don't think they're going to move Philip Broberry. I think they would be foolish to do that.
Or
What do you
Evan
think?
Bouchard, eh?
Or Evan Bouchard? No.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts on that? Would you move any of those players if you could get an equivalent forward for one of those players? Would you do that trade, Bruce?
Yeah. Well, equivalent. I mean, ideally, you get a guy that's in the NHL as opposed to, working his way in. Which I guess I'm thinking Samorukov, but I guess you could say Jones or Bear or Lagesson are in the league. You could get a young forward back for them, but would he improve your top six? I mean, I don't know. You want somebody a little bit more established, I think. And at the same time, I'm not sure how much you want to dump one of those guys for a rental. I'd rather have a guy with a year left on his contract and a reasonable contract. Uh, uh, Depends on who, but I'm reluctant. I mean, depending on who. I mean, if they were able to get a star player under control, that's when you bring in one of those high end prospects into the conversation. But
What if Buffalo was in love with William Lagesson and said, "We'll give you Taylor Hall for William Lagesson," for instance? Now I don't know if now maybe someone would say that's just crazy talk. That they would say the Buffalo could get more for Taylor Hall,
mhm,
that you have your Oilers goggles on there, David. You're overrating William Lagesson
yep,
as a player. Listen, someone would say that if you threw that out to Buffalo fans, but they might not know William Lagesson's game very well. Um,
he'd be one component you'd need to trade multiple assets to get Taylor Hall, even at where he's at right now, which is I think still at one goal.
I think he scored one last game.
Oh, did
I
he
think
get
he's
he
at
got
two.
another one? Oh, he
Yeah,
doubled
he's at
his
two goals.
season
Yeah,
total.
he's got a lot of assists. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he's still a dangerous attacker, and he would certainly change the equation. You'd have to give up plenty to get him, but he would just be a rental, and he would cause all sorts of salary cap issues. You'd have to
They'd have to take some salary.
sculpt a trade somehow that dumped some salary the other way, and who was that exactly?
Yeah. Well, that's the kind of trade that they might be looking at, would be to give up Lagesson or Caleb Jones. I think if you're going to not bring back Tyson Barrie, if that's the decision you make, that he's your rental for this year, um, and I think that's probably the prudent decision myself, then you're going to need Ethan Bear next year, right? You can't trade him. So right now, so that then it comes down to Lagesson or Jones, moving one of those players, and they probably have less trade value than I think they should have. I really like William Lagesson and think he should be in the Oilers lineup right now. So I think he's a good enough defenseman to play an important role on a good team, on a good NHL team right now. But I'm not sure that that would be the opinion of all of our the market would rate him that way. Jones is rated very highly by a lot of Oilers fans. Um, I'm getting he's going through one of these phases where his value, which I would have placed it much higher earlier in the year, isn't
Yeah.
I'd be a little bit more skeptical about trading for him right now. I'd want Lagesson over Jones at this point if I was making a trade. I do think they have to make a deal though, Bruce. Like, or they don't have to, but they have too many lefty with Broberry coming in, and they have Lindstrom in the background. They have Nima Line, and they've got lots of depth there. So I think that they could make a trade and maybe get someone. Luke Glendening, wonder what he would probably be a lower round draft pick, I'm guessing, to get Luke.
I think he's probably third anyway. He's a pretty useful player. He's a very good on face-offs, and he's a defensive-minded bottom sixer, but a pretty good one by everything I've heard. Now I don't watch Detroit's every game or anything, but I do know that Holland likes to talk to Steve Yzerman. We found that out to our chagrin at last year's deadline. So Detroit has useful assets that might be on the market. I mean, Holland's got the red phone right on his desk that he can pick it up.
No more Red Wings trades, man. That Athanasiou trade has bitten them hard, eh?
And the Mike Green trade.
And the Mike Green
They
trade.
gave
Oh,
up
I
a
didn't.
fourth round pick for 2 games of Mike Green.
Yeah.
That didn't end well.
How's Athanasiou doing this year? So, Bruce, which defenseman would you trade if you had to make a trade? Like, let's say, you got it. They decide they want to go move. What would you do?
Yeah, I think, well, of all those guys, Bear has the most name recognition, and you probably get the most for him. Uh, I think Jones could be, you're playing with fire, man, when you're trading these guys that are just still starting to come around. That you could lose those trades pretty bad, because I don't think they hold the value elsewhere in the league that maybe we see in them, and maybe that's our bias, and they just don't have that value. But I just don't think you get enough in return. I mean, if you packaged them with, a 2022 second round pick, maybe you get a decent return. But we've got precious few draft choices already. That trading more of them is, I'm reluctant to get involved in that game. Uh, the Oilers are working from a deficit already on draft picks, and
So you wouldn't
unfortunately,
move
they
any
don't
of
have
those
that much to
guys.
try. I'm very much more a status quo guy. I mean, unless somehow you want to get into the bidding for a guy like Matthias Ekholm out of Nashville, who's got this year and a year to go at 3.75, and that team is struggling. And there's talk that I think Frank Saravalli of TSN had him on top of his trade bait list. And that's a guy who could solve the Clefbaum hole in a quick hurry. But what do you give up to get him? Clefbaum? Plus? I mean, I don't know. But that would be a significant upgrade where you get a tried and true top four left shot defenseman. Which right now they've got Darnell Nurse, and then they've got Chris Russell. Caleb Jones, Chris Russell was a top four. I don't think he is anymore. And the other guys, I mean, Kukuk's gone now, and both Jones and Lagesson are struggling to prove they're NHL defensemen, let alone top four. So that's the sort of trade that would make a significant difference. But the price would be, I would think, if they choose to trade him, that Nashville will get a pretty penny for Matthias Ekholm.
I don't see the Oilers trading for a defenseman. It's that forward position. They got to find someone to play. They do have to find someone to play with Connor McDavid. They found someone in Jesse Puljujärvi, but they need to find another player. And it could be Dominic Cahoon. So in the next few weeks, they'll try out Tyler Ennis. They'll try out Dominic Cahoon. They might even try out Joachim Nygård, who had some success last year in a really small sample size. They'll try out all kinds of people. Cahoon may work, actually. Cahoon may be better with McDavid than he was with Draisaitl, because I don't see. I just see McDavid creates so much, and he creates more than Draisaitl does, frankly. And because he's creating so much, the other guys have to do a little bit less. And Cahoon's kind of a guy that might be suited with a little bit less, like just get the puck, don't make a mistake, move it to McDavid, and when you get it, do the right thing. And I can see Cahoon doing that. And he's also responsible defensively, I believe, generally speaking. So he might be a decent fit. So the need to get someone might diminish. And then of course, we have Dylan Holloway, who I'm guessing is likely to be signed and could be with the Oilers. Now, it's a stretch to think he'd be on the top line. It's more likely he would be on the third line as an energy winger, let's say with Kara and Archibald. That might really work, replacing Tyler Ennis on that line. I could see that. That's the most likely. That's a better bet for Dylan Holloway. So we'll know with Cahoon. If Cahoon doesn't work out and Ennis doesn't really work out on the top line, then you think seriously, I think, about that left wing spot and making a move and trading a defenseman prospect for that kind of really good player that could fit in there on McDavid's line. And again, it doesn't have to be the Taylor Hall category player, because Taylor Hall loves that puck as well. And I'm not sure he's a great fit with McDavid. Some people think he would be. I actually don't think he would necessarily be the right fit.
Well, got that 75-minute sample that says that they had good possession numbers together, but it was a 75-minute sample, so we know it.
I never saw much chemistry or magic between the two, as I recall from that time together. I mean, these are two really good players, so individually, you'd expect them to have good possession numbers, period. So that's not necessarily.
McCollum deliberately put him on different lines, and he had Hall with Draisaitl and Nugent Hopkins at that time was sort of the best fit, and McDavid on a different line. Well, the idea of Hall with Draisaitl is kind of appealing because they were good together.
They were good together, Bruce. That would be more of a fit. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so it could be like a second rung kind of pickup. Like, we recall at one point Pittsburgh traded for Chris Kunitz, to fit in with Sidney Crosby. So that's the kind of player that I'm looking to in terms of someone who could fit with McDavid, a veteran player who's still got some game, who's a very smart, cagey two-way player and really good without the puck. That's what you need with Connor McDavid is a player to fit in that. With Puljujärvi and McDavid, you've got guys who are good with the puck. You need a guy who's really smart without the puck. Cahoon is really smart, I think, without the puck. I think he's a kind of a glue player in his own way, and he's not a bad player, and he might fit in just fine. We'll see how that goes. But if he doesn't, then someone else. Like, find someone else similar to that. And so that I don't think you have to give up a ton to get that player. It's not going to be a super high price at the deadline. It's just being really smart about identifying that player. So I still hold out some hope. Of course, Holloway will magically work his way up to that top line by the end.
I keep having when I see Holloway's game, he gives me little flashes of Esa Tikkanen. Not so much for the pestiferous nature and the and the talking that Tikkanen was famous for, but just more of the style of play of taking a beeline to the puck, being physically aggressive, and having some skill with the puck on the stick, and going to the net and uh, looking after some of the details, some of the dirty work on his line. And I mean, I also have visions of a 20-year-old S. Tikkanen playing in the Stanley Cup Finals and making his NHL debut against Philadelphia Flyers in 1985. That's not going to happen. I mean, for a number of reasons, but I mean, I don't think he's going to arrive fully formed as a 20. Is he still 19, even Holloway, year old? But I think he's pretty close. But by the time their college season ends, there'll be quarantine. I do think the play is probably assuming he signs, and I think there's a better than even chance that he will at that point. But I think Bakersfield is still the play, and if he goes there and knocks it out of the park, then. But the clock's ticking the whole time. There's always that looming quarantine, unless that gets resolved somehow in the coming months.
Cahoon's back on the ice, by the way, in the top six.
Okay.
In a white sweater today. And Mike Smith's in the starters net. No surprise there. They're going to ride Mike Smith.
Yeah, I don't
Not
entirely
sure
get
about
all
that.
of that, frankly, David, with the
Yeah, I hear
the,
you.
with the goalies.
Don't overuse your 38-year-old goalie, because if he gets injured, we've already seen how that's going to play out. So, and then they will need to make a trade. But
Look at
yeah,
Alex Stalock. I mean, they're better, and he's not ready yet, but at least they're better positioned than they were when Smith went down the day after they lost Forsberg on waivers.
the other
uh,
thing with Holloway coming in, Bruce, like the whole third line center thing, and he's been killing it on the face-off dot. And is he going to be as ready as Esa Tikkanen when Tikkanen came in? It's possible. Like they're not that. There's a lot of similarities there. So, but here's my dark horse candidate for a winger for McDavid, Ryan Getzlaf.
okay.
Veteran player. I don't know what the cost would be, but it wouldn't be a first round draft pick, I don't believe. So Getzlaf this year has 2 goals and 7 assists in 9 points in 21 games. He's -3. Maybe he's done. Like maybe that's like bringing in James Neal, but Getzlaf is I think he's the kind of player, and I still put Neal in this category, who can crank it up in the playoffs. I think we'll see when the playoffs come. I think we're going to see a James Neal in the lineup and a valuable contributor on the fourth line. But Getzlaf, I wonder if he would have enough in his tank, Bruce, to still help in that role that I'm talking about on a top line, filling in, maybe doing a lot of the heavy lifting for McDavid in the defensive end, and being that kind of glue player with Puljujarvi and McDavid on a top line. So that's my dark horse wild card candidate for a trade to fill the Chris Kunitz role this playoff season for Connor McDavid.
Yeah, well, I got a big problem with Ryan Getzlaf, and not as a player, but as a contract.
Yeah.
$8.25 million cap hit. So
For
even
how
if they
long?
retained at the end of this year, but even if they retained half of it, you still got to do something to bring in. How are you going to ship out $4 million to Anaheim? I mean, you're going to trade him Chris Russell. I mean, that's the sort of, they have few options. Nobody's going to take James Neal with the 2 years he's got left.
Well, maybe you do trade him Chris Russell, or yeah, I think there's ways to be clever with the money. I mean, Vegas found a way to fit in Robin Lehner, right? So there are ways to do these deals. And I'm not saying you're right. Like, obviously the cap hit is a big issue. You have to work out the price you're going to pay, make it worth.
Adam Larson, but you don't want to do that, and I
No.
don't want to do it either, right? He's half of the money that Ryan Getzlaf is. If they retained half, that would be equal. And I'm not doing that trade.
You're going to have to give up something if you're going to do that trade.
Yep.
And you have to give up something useful for Anaheim, like the equivalent of a second round draft pick to get the guy.
Yeah. Yeah, he's soon
And
to be 36 years old, and he's got lots of mileage.
do you think he'd get a second round pick?
You'd have to work out the money situation, and
Well,
I
let's
think
say you can work out the money situation.
well, I think how you work out the money situation depends then on what you give up to get him.
Yeah, fair enough.
So,
Alrighty. Bruce, anything else? Any other final thoughts on the trade? It sounds like you're kind of in the camp of hold them. That's what I'm getting from you. Is
I'm a low risk
strong hold
guy,
them
and
five.
last year's deadline kind of soured me. I mean, they traded 4 future draft picks, and they got Tyler Ennis, and all they had to re-sign, and they did. So as a marginally useful player, but not a game changer. And they got 2 guys that that didn't make any impact at all and are already gone from the organization. And I mean, I guess if you trade for a rental, like if instead of asking to see you, they got Tyler Toffoli like the Canucks did for roughly similar um, investment, and they only got him for the rest of the season, but he was quite helpful to them in that last part of the season and in the playoffs. Whereas Athanasiou just went completely uh, flat here, just wasn't able to score, and that was really what he was brought in to do. So now I think that having made that investment of future assets last year, it weakens their ability to do that this year because they're still paying that price in the upcoming draft. So I'm more of a laissez-faire, and let's see where we go with the team we got. Deal with goaltending in the summer. See where Clefbaum's at the summer, and try and resolve that situation one way or the other. And you know what? I think they got some pretty good. They got some pretty good things going on here. Or they did have before Toronto came to town. That makes them a competitive team.
How about it? Here's another one for you, Bruce.
Mm-hmm.
You're gonna like this one. Dustin Brown.
Yeah, he's scoring goals. He's scoring goals out there in LA still, and
Yeah.
I
Wow.
mean, he
They've
brings
got
a
they're
few
gonna make the
things to the
playoffs though, aren't
table.
they?
They're looking pretty good, I think.
Yeah.
I don't follow those standings honestly as close as I do the Canadian one, but they are in sixth place, 9, 8, and 4. But they're right in the battle with Arizona, Minnesota for fourth place in the West, but Honda West.
Yeah.
Man,
Dustin Brown, Bruce.
uh, yeah, that would take a lot of getting used to, David.
I think I could get used to it fast if he can still play hockey.
Hmm.
Yeah. Um, so I do think that there. So again, we'll see what Cahoon does, and if that doesn't work, then you go to we'll come back to this in a few weeks, obviously, and have another such discussion.
Yeah, Yuri's day is still what 5, almost 6 weeks off, right? 5.5 weeks from now.
That's right.
So we got lots to do. Although there's some talk that teams might make their move early just because of the quarantine and so on. If you make a trade on April 12th and you wait until the 26th before the guy can play for you, that's getting mighty late in the season. I mean, if you're home and cooled out in a playoff spot, you can do that. But I'm not getting the impression the Oilers are going to be there either.
So the Oilers' defense pairings, Bruce, are Nurse, Barry, Lagesson, Larson, Jones, Bear, with Russell and Bouchard on the outside looking in.
Hmm.
And I would play Bouchard ahead of Bear at this point. I think on merit, Bouchard's done better than Ethan Bear this year. And they're
Hmm.
both young defensemen. I don't see why Ethan Bear is ahead of Evan Bouchard, honestly. Like, I don't see him having any.
Giving them a chance to bounce back.
That's what they're doing. So we can think with the coach, and that's what he's thinking. But
The way they do with Mike Smith and not with Mikko Koskinen.
I just think you go with talent. You bet on talent, and that's why I would be betting on Evan Bouchard slightly ahead of Bear right now. And we'll see what. See no forward lines yet, as far as I can tell. All right, Bruce. Lessons learned from the Leafs
Oh, yeah.
losses, the three losses to the Leafs. What are you taking away?
Well, on the game day, or no, the game night after the first beating of the three, I led my grades post with objects in first place are further than they appear. And they're even further than that after three successive beatdowns. It's now a 10-point gap between Toronto and Edmonton. And I'd say first place is it's not in the rear view. It's that cloud of dust that's receding into the far distance in front. Uh, the Oilers were really exposed on a number of levels. And it was so strange. Like the team was firing on all cylinders for the better part of a month before that, and it was like everything came apart at the seams. And I was discouraged by uh, sort of the lack of pushback and almost that they were in the inevitability of the third loss in particular. That just as soon as something went against them, they were done, and they got to get past that, and they got to get past it fast. Uh, it's frustrating to me. I've been frustrated for years at how the Oilers roll out the welcome mat for visiting teams in their home arenas, dating back to the old Coliseum. This year, the Oilers are 6-8-0 at Rogers Place, 8-3-0 on the road. Now, how is that? And also that when they score first at home, six times they won all 6 games. When they didn't score first at home, 8 times they lost all 8 games. So being ready and they were ready for the starts of those games. But as soon as that first goal went in, boom! It seemed like they knew that was that. I don't know. Uh, it, it it put them back in the middle of the pack. I mean, seriously, in the standings now, they're 4 points ahead of Calgary, with Calgary having one game in hand. So if the Flames are able to win the game tomorrow night, they're within, they just need to win the game in hand and they're tied. That's the fifth place team. Like Edmonton had a nice little cushion here a week ago, and it's basically gone. And nights like last night when Winnipeg and Montreal play a 3-point game, while Calgary and Vancouver both win their games against the first and last place teams, and all of a sudden the standings are that much tighter. So my takeaway is they got to get their crap together fast, and we'll see tomorrow if they got what it takes to bounce back from this trio of basically crushing defeats. Like that was as discouraging a set of games that uh, we've had to experience in quite some time, frankly.
I'm a little less discouraged than you are by those games, Bruce. The Oilers going into those games were getting 13 grade A chances for every 10 grade A chances that the other team was getting, or 10 and a half maybe. It's a
Mm-hmm.
significant margin for the Edmonton Oilers. They're a good team. Um, I think though that it's fair to say that Toronto was better than the Oilers at every aspect, every single aspect of the game. And so this is starting with skill level, like the most obvious thing. Toronto was more able to make passes, more able to make good passes, more able to make good decisions with the puck. This is why I think it's an imperative for Tippett to work in Evan Bouchard on defense. He is your best puck moving defenseman. Yes, he's young. There's going to be some mistakes. You've got to play him. You've got to build him up, and you've got to figure out a way to do that. Now Tippett's to give Tippett credit. He's been very good at bringing along young players on this team. There's been a number of young players, Yamamoto, Puljujärvi, Bear, Jones, who have all done well with him as coach. So I think that will happen, but let's see it happen. And sitting him in games, this will be 3 out of the last 4. I don't see that as a big part of the plan. So we, at the same time, we see a coach who's got a bit of a sweet tooth for veteran players. I'm glad Lagesson is going in for Chris Russell. I think William Lagesson's a significantly better player right now than Chris Russell is. So again, this is the coach making a good decision, but I'd like to see him get Bouchard in there.
Well, he's given rope to all three of Bear, Jones, and Lagesson, and it's pretty tough to get them all four in there, the young guys, at the same time. So, I
Yeah,
mean, it's not like he's sitting out Bouchard so that he can get Chris Russell in the lineup, for example.
No, it's Tyson Barrie essentially really
Yeah.
is taking a
Well.
spot if we're
Hmm.
completely honest.
Yeah.
So I think we need to beat the Leafs, Bruce. You're going to need a healthy Draisaitl. We didn't have a healthy Draisaitl
Hmm.
in that series. We're going to need one. The Leon Draisaitl that played so well in the last half of last year, the Leon Draisaitl who played so well against the Anaheim Ducks. We're going to need the dynamite line together. We're going to need the sum of the really great players on the Edmonton Oilers to be greater than their parts. So that's for both the dynamite line and for McDavid's line. They have to solve McDavid's line. They can't have this where the sum is less than the part. So they really need to think hard about what's going to work there and work on the second line. So I think Cahoon might be the answer. We'll see. But that's another thing that has to get going. You're going to have to. You're going to have to be. I think actually the bottom. I think they're close to figuring out their third and fourth lines, Bruce.
Mm-hmm.
So they're not that far in a lot of ways from having that work. Dylan Holloway might be a really key component, though, come playoff time, the next time we face them, on the third line. Let's say you had a third line of Holloway, Kara, and Archibald. That comes close to matching maybe the power, the speed, and the skill that the Leafs had on their third line. Because you have to have an answer for that. You're not gonna compete with that team unless you've got three lines that are really going. So if Holloway isn't on your top line, I like Tyler Ennis, but Tyler Ennis is this year, Bruce. He's the forward most likely to make a defensive mistake, not to cover someone, to lose a battle. He adds a lot on the attack, but everything he gives you on the attack, he gives up in his own end so far this year. And I'm not convinced that he's going to be the answer there to beat the Leafs in the playoffs. Those guys are all big on their third line. Engvall, Mikheyev, and is it Hyman?
Yeah.
Those are big, fast players. Can Ennis compete with that? Archibald's hanging in there because he's so rugged, but I think it's more likely that Holloway is going to be able to have an impact. So that's another thing that has to be in place is you got to start to meet that size and speed of the Leafs bottom lines. And then on the fourth line, I think between the rest of the players that the Oilers have, including Kassian, Haas, Chason, Neal, there's enough players there, interesting players. Both Kassian and Haas can both skate that I think you'll be able to meet their fourth line challenge as well. So I'm not pessimistic about those bottom lines competing against the Leafs bottom lines.
Now, hopefully, when Cassian comes back, he'll come back with a burr in his saddle and be Cassian. He's been frankly a disappointment since the minute he signed that contract, and he was very ho hum down the stretch last year, and he was poor in the play-ins, and this year he just didn't get a lot done. And then when he tried to get himself going by getting in that fight, he goes and breaks his hand, right, or whatever he did. But Oilers need a rambunctious Cassian, or at least some semblance of that, and he could really change the mix down there a little bit. When it comes to Toronto, I mean, you talk about how much better they were with the puck. I was impressed with how much better they were without the puck, and how their forwards were how their forwards were absolutely committed on the back check. And when the Oilers got the puck and started to move north with it, they had to always watch for the guy on their tail that was coming back to strip it from them, and they just didn't have much room or time to operate. And I'm not sure the Oilers, to play with that kind of defensive commitment as a team requires a little bit of or a lot of a reset from what we saw in those games. And before that, they were pretty good, but not at that level that Toronto showed, four lines deep of guys, busting their hump defensively. I mean, Jonathan Willis pointed out that Mitch Marner of Toronto had 3 blocked shots in one of the games, which was more than all of the Oilers combined in the 3-game series, all the Oilers forwards combined in the 3 games. And so, I mean, that's a first-line player showing defensive commitment, and that's the, the Oilers, I mean, those top lines, they're two-way game. It kind of comes and goes, and I'd sure like to see a sign that it's going to come and stay for a while.
Well, apparently, Rashog's reporting the lines are RNH, McDavid, and Puljujärvi, Cahoon, Draisaitl, and Yamamoto. So if it's not working, stick with it. Seems to be the idea for Dave Tippett. I've made my point plenty
That
of
leaves me
times.
cold, David. I got to say.
It really does, Bruce. He's I don't know. He's just I don't know what the deal is there. I can't figure out.
Something
Those
going
lines
on
aren't
behind
working.
the scenes that we are not privy to, but that just, uh, from a competitive standpoint, it just seems bizarre to me that I mean, Nugent Hopkins' stats are so much better. You wrote about some of this in your post the other day, and I
Yeah.
looked at it a different way, and I might mention it in my post game day post tomorrow. But Nugent Hopkins' stats are vastly superior with Draisaitl than with McDavid over these past 2 years. But
Yeah, Bruce, it's not a good call, and maybe the players are involved in this. Like you
well, that's what
know,
I'm thinking.
yeah, that's what everybody's thinking, right? Like but we can't we don't know that, so we can only speculate because it doesn't seem to make sense on the face of it. There doesn't seem to be any other explanation for it because the numbers are so clear that this group of this particular mix doesn't maximize the offensive or defensive output of any of these players, not even McDavid. So
Mm.
I don't know. I don't get it. But so it is. So it is. Like you see, you don't even know. Like you're preventing yourself from having some knowledge about whether Cahoon is a good fit with McDavid, right? This is something that they don't know, and it's
Yeah,
something they should find out. Now
yeah.
seems like a good time. And before the trading deadline, you got some games here, so why not do that? That doesn't make any sense to me, Bruce. I don't like it. I don't like it one bit.
Big game,
Alrighty.
big game tomorrow against Daryl Sutter and the Calgary Flames. They'll be coming to town a little pumped, I would imagine, after a big win last night and a even bigger coach change to old, well-known opponent. Daryl Sutter caused the Oilers grief when he was in Calgary and more grief when he was in Los Angeles. So that changes the equation a little bit.
Here are the lines: RNH, McDavid, Puljujärvi, Cahoon, Draisaitl, Yamamoto, Shore, Kara, and Archibald, Neil, Haas, and Chason. So, okay, I'll start out with
Where's
what I
Ennis?
like. I really
Where,
like the fourth line, Neil, Haas, and Chason. I think that's a fourth line that can
hmm?
work. They got the speed of Haas and the two big Bobby Clobbers on the wing who can still crank it up in limited minutes. Chason's excellent defensively. Such a conscientious player. I'm
Hmm.
quite a fan of his.
Yeah,
Shore
we could.
in for Ennis. Listen, Tyler Ennis's defensive mistakes are real. They're ongoing. They're at a level. They're at a tourist kind of level. So there's nothing physical stopping him from playing defense. He's got to make. He's one of the players on this team that has to make that commitment. And I know Mark Spector gets in a lot of hell, including on Oilers now, for suggesting that McDavid and Draisaitl need to crank it up defensively. But that's the truth. I mean, I saw Austin. The defining moment of that series to me was the first shift of the dynamite line in the third game. They almost score, and RNH is putting it kind of half shot, half pass to Draisaitl in the crease, and who's down there in the crease fishing the puck out? Austin Matthews. He was
Mr.
there.
Sulky himself.
He was there. Yeah, maybe he was there, Bruce. And sometimes Draisaitl and McDavid haven't been there, and in that spot, in the
Hmm?
right time, in the right moment to make that play in the defensive slot. So all of the forwards
Yeah. Oh
got to
yeah.
crank it up on defense. Ennis is one of them. He's paying the price for it right now for his defensive play. So put in Shore. I think Tyler Ennis is significantly better, obviously, than Devon Shore on the attack, but I can see why they're making that move if it's to send a message. I agree with the message.
Was Ennis on the ice today, or was
Yes.
Shore? Yeah, he was, and Shore was in his spot, eh? Interesting.
Ennis, Russell, and Turris. I would have put Nygaard in. as opposed to Joachim Nygaard as opposed to Devon Shore. But I mean, I'm not going to quibble. I don't mind Devon Shore as a winger. I don't think he can play center because I don't think he reads the game well enough defensively to play center. So
Ennis Turris and Patrick Russell, and no, is Nygaard out there at all?
Nygaard rotating is on fifth line.
Oh, wow. Rotating on fifth line is never a good place to be.
It is not. I like the player, Bruce, and I would have him. I would be playing him right now, again ahead of Shore. So there we are. That's what the lines are.
All right. Well, see what happens.
All right, Bruce. Let's leave it there then.
Yeah. Well, just before I do have a final thought, and my final thought is condolences to the Gretzky family and to, frankly, the country. It's lost a great icon of hockey daddery in Walter Gretzky, who showed us all how it's done, and pushing but not over pushing his kid, and he's going to be missed. My overriding memory of Walter Gretzky is actually a quote from Wayne in 1980 when he lost on the tiebreaker the Art Ross Trophy to Marcel Dion, because Dion had 2 more goals and Wayne had 2 more assists. And 19 years old, disappointed, Wayne Gretzky made a classy statement of simply, "My dad always taught me an assist is as good as a goal," which is a quote that resonates in more than just hockey. And it's about teamwork and getting the job done collectively, and it kind of encapsulates Wally as he became to know later in life, and had the opportunity to shake his hand a couple of times, and just a class act, and very proud, and every reason to be very proud hockey dad, and ordinary, everyday, hard-working, man of the people, basically, is how I would describe Walter, and he will be missed.
Without Walter Gretzky's mentorship of his son, we don't get the 1980s era of hockey. I don't think, Bruce. We don't get that incredible, fast-flowing, free game that Gretzky drove. He drove it.
Mm-hmm.
And he changed hockey history with his style of play and the offensive dominance that he brought to the Edmonton Oilers. And there's a few people who deserve credit for that. Gretzky himself, of course, top of the list. Glenn Sather, who had freed up Gretzky to play his game, didn't try to change his game, let him go for it. And Walter, as Walter is the one who was working with his son to think about hockey in a different way, and to train, not to get out of the narrow confines of Canadian hockey tactics of that time, and to play a revolutionary game, attacking game. So we just owe Walter Gretzky that great era of hockey. So I hold him in the highest of esteem. And
don't go where the puck has been, go where it's going to be.
I think that's Walter's quote.
Yes, it is.
Not Wayne's quote. It's always attributed to Wayne.
Oh, Wayne attributes it to Walter, though.
Wayne gives his dad credit, but it's now in the popular imagination. And Bruce, my theory about that is 300 years from now, no one may remember Wayne Gretzky, but people will still remember may still remember that phrase and still use that phrase as a way to talk about a way of thinking about the world and about life. It may be the most lasting contribution and of Wayne Gretzky to the world and Walter Gretzky. So, all right, Bruce, thanks for talking today.
Yeah, thanks for listening, everyone.
And in the meantime, and in between times, this has been another edition of the Cult of Hockey podcast.